The overturning of Roe v. Wade, I would say it's had a ripple effect already around the world.
The Supreme Court of Canada in R v. Morgentaler did not conclude that there is a constitutional right to abortion in Canada.
Prime Minister, do you believe in equal rights for all human beings?
If we don't have the right to life, then we have no other rights at all.
Welcome to this special edition of Life on Film on this National March for Life Week 2024. The wait is finally over. Thousands of Canadians will be gathering in Ottawa this Thursday to march for life for an end to abortion. And we are kicking things off with tonight's special presentation of Roe Canada in conversation with filmmaker and film director Kevin Dunn and the film's principal investigators Josie Luetke and Ruth. This film was released earlier this year and it's been screened all across Canada in many different provinces. And if you haven't seen the full feature yet, you can still rent it or buy it online at roecanada.com. I encourage all of you to watch this wonderful documentary that asks a very simple question. Could Canada ever experience a Dobbs-like victory? So before we get to tonight's presentation of Roe Canada in conversation with, here is a brief run through of all the wonderful pro-life events that are taking place this week in our nation's capital. Our first event of the week is the Pro-Life Coffee House on Tuesday, May 7th at St. Mary's Church at 7 p.m. This event brings together local talent for an evening of pro-life inspired music. It's free admission, but feel free to drop off some baby items for Birthright Ottawa. On Wednesday, it gets really busy. We're pleased to host a screening of Abby Johnson's latest film, Unthinkable, followed by a panel discussion with Abby herself and film director Drew Martin at 4 p.m. Space is limited, so if you are interested in attending this screening, give us a call or send an email to info@marchforlife.ca, and we will send you a special RSVP link. Wednesday evening, there's a pro-life mass at St. Teresa's Parish in downtown Ottawa, followed by a candlelight procession that will make its way to the Human Rights Monument, where the annual candlelight vigil will take place from 9 to 10 p.m. The vigil will feature moving testimonies, prayers, and songs, and it's the perfect way to remind ourselves of why we march. And now we have Thursday, the big day. Starting at 10 a.m., we have the National Mass for Life at Notre Dame Cathedral, plus several other masses and prayer services all across the city. You can see a full list of religious services that morning on marchforlife.ca. The pro-life rally starts at 12:30 p.m. on Parliament Hill. We have some amazing speakers lined up for the rally, including some wonderful music by Steadfast Worship. After the rally, we hit the streets of downtown Ottawa at 1:30 p.m. to March for Life. We'll have plenty of signs and banners for everyone, but we also love to see your own signs and your own church and school banners in the crowd. So don't forget to represent your groups and where you're from. Later that evening, we're hosting the annual Rose Dinner Gala at 6:30 p.m. with keynote speakers Abby Johnson and Sean Carney, co-founder of 40 Days for Life. The reception starts at 5 p.m. The deadline to buy tickets is tomorrow, May the 6th. So if you don't have your tickets for the Rose Dinner yet, please go to marchforlife.ca, buy your tickets. You don't want to miss this wonderful evening of fellowship, of pro-life networking, of wonderful food, and of course, an amazing presentation by Abby and Sean. So tomorrow is the deadline, marchforlife.ca, get your tickets. And if you can't go, maybe you want to buy a ticket for a friend or a family member who is able to go. And finally, on Friday, May the 10th, Niagara Region Right to Life, in partnership with CLC Youth, is hosting the annual Live On Youth Summit. This is a full-day youth conference featuring speakers, workshops, and pro-life experts. This is by far the most comprehensive and engaging pro-life youth conference in the nation, organized by youth for youth. So you can still get tickets to attend the Youth Summit. Go to marchforlife.com/youth-summit. So that's it. That's a National March for Life week in a glance. Again, I encourage all of you to go to marchforlife.ca for the full schedule all the items, everything explained. If you haven't bought your tickets, you can still buy your tickets on marchforlife.ca. If you have any comments or questions, or you want to speak to someone, you can call our office, our headquarters office in Hamilton, Ontario, or you can call our Ottawa bureau in Ottawa. All the numbers are on the website. Okay, so back to tonight's special program, Roe Canada in conversation with film director Kevin Dunn and the principal investigators Josie Luetke and Ruth Robert. Enjoy the show, and I'll see you back here after the program.
I feel like there's a dark cloud hanging over the country.
What do you think about abortion?
I think abortion is a default position for our society.
It's just a clump of cells.
Most people who advocate abortion, they do it because they're swept away by the spirit of the age. They care what people think about them.
My body! My body! My choice! My choice!
It's not healthcare, it's death. It's intentional, needless, elective death.
Stand up and defend reproductive rights at every single opportunity.
Not my Canada. This is not who we are.
I respect life, just like anybody else does, but I also, as a physician, respect a woman's right to choose the outcome of a pregnancy.
They say it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to kill a child too.
If Canada as a society or a country wants to protect the preborn child, I think it needs to start with defining when that child becomes a human being.
We've pitted women against their children for so long. And how do we repair that damage?
I actually think your task is impossible.
The only reason that we won this particular fight was because we didn't give up.
Well, this is a battle between good and evil.
No! You put my position! No way!
When you don't speak the truth, you lose your sense of self. You lose who you are.
There will be no peace until we protect the child in the womb.
Hi everybody, my name is Kevin Dunn. I'm the director-producer of the new film Roe Canada, The True North in a Post-Roe World, and joining me are my two principal investigators, Josie Luetke and Ruth Robert. Josie's joining me from Hamilton, and Ruth is in St. John's, Newfoundland. And ladies, how are you doing? Josie, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling awesome. We put so much work into this film, and I'm really excited for Canadians across the country to be able to see it.
And Ruth, how are you? How are things?
I'm doing well.
In the Rock?
I'm very excited.
Great. Yeah, you're in the Rock right now, right?
Yes, I am.
The idea of overcoming the scourge that has been so prevalent in around the world, but especially here in Canada, the scourge of abortion, this attack on life, we know who wins in the end. We know that one day we will restore a culture of life in this country and around the world, and that will warm all of our hearts. What we wanted to do, as this film is being launched online at roecanadafilm.com, you can actually watch it online right now, as well as book a screening at your church or organization. Just click on the link below. We wanted to share with you some of our behind the scenes events and memories that we have, because really it was about a year ago that we were right in the thick of filming at the first National March for Life, the first March for Life in Washington, D.C. since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I'll start with that question, ladies. I'll let you each take a shot at that. Josie, tell me what it felt like for you being at the March for Life, the first ever since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision. What was that like when you think about a year ago?
It was such an honor. It was extraordinary to think about how different it is from Canada, in the sense that these were people that were marching that had a lot of more work left to do, but they were also marching with a huge victory under their belts. And to take part in that triumph and that celebration, already we're hearing about thousands of lives that have been saved thanks to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And people were marching knowing that there were going to be people alive, maybe marching 20 years from now, thanks to this Dobbs decision. So it was an immense honor. Like I said, it was a feeling like no other to be a part of that.
And although we know that, now the decisions are going back to the states, and we've seen some pretty horrific things, such as in Ohio, where it's abortion on demand, basically. We've also seen the trigger laws go into effect, where abortion has been basically gone back to pre Roe v. Wade, and which means restrictions on abortion, or if not, abortion ban altogether. And as you say, many lives have been saved by that. Ruth, can you speak to your experience in Washington, D.C. at the very first ever March for Life since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision?
Well, it's like Josie said, it was an incredible experience to be a part of history. And it was nice to be just one amongst millions. Like, often there's that sense of, I want to be the one person, but it felt so much more an honor to be lost in the crowd and know that so many people actually do care about life from the moment of conception until natural death.
I think for me, being there and seeing there was one point where we were trying to get an overview, we were trying to get a shot of the crowd, the immense crowd that was in Washington, and our friends at EWTN said, yeah, just go up there on our platform. And so we got up there and we just got and it was this sea of people, just from as far as the eye could see. I think it was the number was somewhere near 500,000. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this will probably never be shown on CNN or any of the major networks. But here we are witnessing it firsthand with our own eyes, and you can't argue with the truth. The movement is alive and well. People are concerned to the point of traveling from across the country, from right to activism on the streets, like you two both, to be there and to witness for life. And so for me, that was the moment for me, was looking back on this sea of people that just seemed endless, all their hearts in the right spot. And although it's a horror, the horror of abortion, we can never forget it, you could still see the joy in people's hearts with the hope of what happened with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and that future hope when one day we will respect life at all stages. That was it for me at that first March for Life in 2023 in Washington, D.C. And that's what I pray for, that day when all life will be respected from conception until natural death.
Welcome to the 50th March for Life. Of the past 50 years, the March for Life has become the largest human rights demonstration worldwide. And while the march began as a response to Roe, we don't end as a response to Roe being overturned. Why? Because we're not yet done.
Jeannie, can you tell us how the March for Life contributed to the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
When the decision came down, I was really thinking in my heart just of all the marchers, the collective millions over the years who've given witness to the inherent dignity of the unborn child and their mothers. And I can't think of anything else more powerful that Roe is not settled law than all the marchers going past the Supreme Court year after year after year and getting bigger and bigger and younger and younger.
Countless times we chanted the slogan, hey, hey, ho, ho, Roe versus Wade has got to go. And today we celebrate Roe is gone. Future generations will someday look back on us and wonder how and why a society that bragged about its commitment to human rights could have legally sanctioned and aggressively promoted child beheadings, dismemberment, chemical poisoning, and forced expulsion from the womb. The injustice of abortion need not be forever, and because of you, it won't be.
I proclaim that future generations will live and not die.
You're mine.
I want to move to some of the things in the film. So after we got back from filming in Washington in January of 2023 at the March for Life, I got this call from you, Josie, saying, "Hey, listen, I understand that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, our most pro-abortion Prime Minister in the history of Canada, is going to be having dinner at this restaurant." And you said, "Hey, should we go down and maybe film this for the film?" And I was like, "Okay, well, we'll see what he says. That would be interesting. We'll capture whatever you can capture." So can you take us to that moment? You were doing some activism, and you were planning on doing some activism, and then you ended up with the leader of our wonderful country of Canada right at the site you were doing some activism.
It was actually a crazy story because we had just got back from the Washington, D.C. March for Life, and it was a lovely trip, but it was also very busy and exhausting. And Ruth was scheduled to fly back to Newfoundland, but then we heard from an anonymous source that Justin Trudeau would be having dinner at a restaurant. And so we immediately pivoted. Ruth rescheduled her flight. We really wanted to do activism outside of this restaurant because I have spoken to Justin Trudeau before. I know he's seen abortion victim photography, but the hope is that we'll keep presenting the victims of this injustice to him, and we keep hoping that he's going to have a crisis of conscience and change his mind on the abortion issue. And so it was a night in the middle of January. It was cold. We were out there for 2 hours waiting for him. But what we didn't realize, we were just expecting Justin Trudeau, but the entire Liberal cabinet ended up showing up at this restaurant. So we saw minister after minister walk by, and it was incredible because now we know that all of them know what abortion looks like. And so they can't say that they were ignorant about it, but it was also very intense to see all of these really important people walk by and to repeatedly ask them, do you believe in equal rights for all human beings? Because that's what they say. They say that they believe in equality and human rights, and yet the most basic human right, the right to life, is being denied to the preborn. So that was a really special experience. I chalk it up to God's providence that we were just in the right place at the right time.
So Ruth, take me to that night again. What was that moment like for you? You do activism pretty much, every week, if not every day sometimes. And here you are in front of all of these government leaders as they walk by. What was that like for you?
It was overwhelming. I wasn't expecting to have this opportunity. So like Josie said, it was just a divine providence moment. But when the Liberal cabinet was actually walking by us, it felt actually very routine in that I was focused on doing what I always do, asking people, what do you think about abortion? And trying to engage in dialogue with them. And I actually did not realize until after the moment had passed that I had actually addressed Justin Trudeau, because there were so many people walking by and I was focused on each individual person trying to talk to them. And they was going so fast that it was only after I'd spoken to him that I went, oh, wow, that was the Prime Minister. This whole moment you've been building up to, and it's just a few seconds that are so powerful, but you are just a part of the wave. What I remember most actually is the cold, because we were not planning this. So I thought, be going to DC, it's a break from the cold. I didn't pack warm clothes, or warm enough clothes. So Josie actually had to lend me her scarf, which she later gave me because she said it looked nice on me. Thanks, Josie. And my colleague, Kim Headley, who was filming, she lent me her gloves. And I wore double, triple socks, and I was still freezing. I actually, towards the end, when we're waiting for Trudeau to come, I remember thinking, I can't feel my toes. And moving them again and again, trying to determine how close I was to frostbite, and thinking, I'm offering this suffering up for the unborn. I am not going to be bested by Trudeau being late. I am going to brave the cold, even if it means I can't feel my toes anymore. So it was quite the experience, and it was definitely worth it.
Back to your point, before we move on, Josie, I think, you got to figure out how many times would this happen in the life of a bureaucrat or a cabinet member or a prime minister, where they are face to face with the reality of abortion on one of your placards, which, it's undeniably human, undeniably a baby. At that moment, I mean, how many times would that happen in the course of a politician's? They can hear about it, they can think about it, they might, flip by on a documentary or whatever, maybe, but to actually come face to face with somebody who's saying, do you believe in human rights for all human beings?
The answer is not often enough, but still more often than you would think. And I have to credit the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform and the variety of community groups that are using abortion victim photography, because this is what they're aiming to do. They're aiming to show the public the reality of abortion. And then when we do hear about politicians coming by, we aim to be at that location. So again, that they see the victims, and we can't control how they respond, and they might choose to continue to perpetrate the injustice of abortion, but they cannot say that they did not know. So again, this is not the first time that abortion was seen by Justin Trudeau. Again, it's rare that you see the entire Liberal cabinet walk by victims of abortion. But I hope that in the future, they will see these images a lot more often, that they cannot escape these victims until we see an end to abortion.
I found a fellow Canadian here in the crowd at the March for Life, Matea Murta. You're now living in the United States, so can you kind of compare those experiences?
But the thing with America is that there's this momentum building, and that's spreading into Canada. And I feel like Canadians are finally starting to pay attention. They're like, oh my gosh, if the United States can do this, we can do this. So it's actually been a good experience to see both sides.
Right now I'm with another fellow Canadian. What is it like? Can you tell us about this experience?
The energy is really strong. There's a lot of the members of the clergy, the laity, there's religious sisters, nuns. It's so beautiful. It's just beautiful. The Dobbs decision, when it arrived in the lower courts, was actually what got me interested in politics. And so it was really special for me particularly that justice and charity was being extended throughout one of the most powerful countries in the world. And hopefully it'll extend throughout the entire world.
So Ruth, at the March for Life in Washington, D.C., the very first march since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, you're there with 500,000 people. And you were talking to me earlier about how you couldn't believe how many people you knew within that crowd. And this was a bit of a surprise for you. Can you share?
Yeah, so it was incredible because as soon as we got there, I ran into some people I knew through 40 Days for Life, friends of mine, and they called out my name and I recognized them. And we hadn't been there an hour, and I'd already ran into two people I'd met, and then they were telling me who else had come that I knew, or mutual friends that we had. And then when Josie and I were going to the expo, we hadn't been there like half an hour, and I ran into someone else I knew, called out, "Oh, Ruth, do you remember me? We met at this event." And I said, "Of course, yes." So it was just amazing. And then it wasn't even just American friends that I have. It was Canadian friends too. So one of the friends I met during that first hour, she was manning a booth at the Youth Summit. And she texts me and says, "Ruth, I met someone from Canada I should introduce you to." And so I go say, "Okay, here I am." And we meet up. And I go, "I know you. I met you last year at the Canadian March for Life." And she said, "Yes." And so it was really good to meet up again. And I was thrilled to see the camaraderie that can develop between Canada and the States. It's not so different. It's the same cause for life.
There certainly are a lot of reasons to be disappointed with what's going on in Canada. I look with horror at what I see. I feel like there's a dark cloud hanging over the country. Having said that, there are always good people who are willing to stand for justice and stand for truth. And I know a lot of those people in Canada, and right there is our hope, that there are people who say, this isn't right, so I'm going to speak against it. And that is going to then cause someone else to say, oh, well, if you're going to be bold and courageous, maybe I can be bold and courageous. And that's how change happens. Whenever people are in the midst of darkness, they think, the light is never going to come. But what comes to my mind is actually something that I encountered very early in my pro-life career. It was before I was full-time, and I was just working a summer job at the local pro-life office in my hometown. And one of my jobs was to take the emails that they would get, back in the day, this was like 2000, to take the emails and print out key messages and file them in the proper file folder. And I remember a sermon came via email that was given by the now late Father Richard John Newhouse. And it was titled, Telling the World Its Own Story. It's amazing. You gotta look it up online. The whole thing is online. And 20 years later, I can still remember one of the quotes from it that I have used in talks and referred to time and again, and it's about hope. And near the end of his sermon, which, by the way, I'll say is where I got that Martin Luther King Jr. quote about whom you would change, you must first love, and they must know that you love them. Newhouse cited that quote, and that's the first time I ever heard that was a King quote, and that's where I got that from. But near the end of the sermon, Father Newhouse says, hope is a virtue of having looked unblinkingly into all the reasons for despair, into all the reasons that would seem to falsify hope. And he said, but to nonetheless say Christ is Lord. Nonetheless say this is the story of the world. To say this is a story to which I will surrender myself day by day. And he said, not simply on one altar call, but he said as the entirety of one's life, in which every day is a laying of your life on the altar of the Lord Jesus Christ, being offered up in perfect sacrifice to the Father. And I just think to myself that it isn't about one decision, okay, I'm gonna be pro-life and I'm gonna speak out here and I've done my thing and it's over. No, it's every day we get back up again, and when it seems like a really stormy, rainy, cloudy day where there's a lot of darkness around, we're still going to get up that day and do something for the pro-life cause. And then the next day and the next day. And sometimes sun breaks through and gives us some encouragement and improves our mood. And then the rain comes back again. But we still get up and we make a decision each day to do the right thing. And then we therefore have hope.
We did so much traveling for this film: Florida, Washington, D.C., The Rock, Newfoundland, in Ottawa, Toronto, Hamilton, and various other places. And Josie, you shared with me a story about crossing the border and something very special that happened that kind of, maybe I call these a little kiss from heaven, a little kind of thumbs up from God that we're on the right track here in what we're doing. Can you share that moment with us?
Yes. So we were traveling to Florida. We had a week's worth of interviews to do, and I was super nervous that I wasn't going to be let across the border. And so driving up to the border, we were praying, and we were just praying that they'd let us through. I had rehearsed what I was going to say, like we were doing research and interviews for a film. If they asked what the film was going to be about, I was going to say social issues, just comparing Canada and the United States. I didn't really have a plan for like what to say after that, because you never know when like the border guard's personal prejudices might affect whether or not they let you through. And so I did get to that point in the conversation, and then the border guard asked me, social issues, like what social issues? And then I was like, abortion. And he was like, for or against? And I'm like, this is we're heading into really bad territory at this moment. But I just said, I am for the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And his face just lit up, and he started telling me about the Sisters of Life and how Abby Johnson had visited his state. He was super enthusiastic, and he actually gave me the litany of trust from the Sisters of Life as well. And the Sisters of Life, in case you don't know, are a group of nuns that specifically dedicate themselves to helping women in crisis pregnancies and helping post-abortive mom and dads. So it was a God moment for sure. And then when we drove away, having been let through into the United States, just the sense of like, God, you've got our back here. Like you want us to do that. So it was just like such a moment of grace and reassurance. And again, divine providence.
Well, what's incredible about that is I had the same experience as Josie months apart from her when I went to the UN and I was crossing the border. And I had the same concerns, like, what if they don't let me through because they're prejudiced? If I say I'm going for the Commission on the Status of Women, and I say I'm with a pro-life group, what will they think? And same question, he was doing his job very thoroughly. And so I said, what will I said I was pro-life. And he said, oh, good, I am too. And he talked about the Sisters for Life. So I think I met the same man Josie met months apart. It was really incredible to have that confirmation. Like, what are the odds? I don't know, but it was very touching.
It's funny, because I've obviously do a lot of traveling as well, and it wasn't during this film, but another film I was doing, and I had a similar experience where, it was like I came to that border, and of course, crossing into the U.S., you have to make sure that they know that you're doing a Canadian film, and we're doing everything by the book. But then they say, what's the film about? And, I had to say, you just have to, you just say the truth. I'm doing a pro-life film on the sanctity of human life, on the preciousness of human life. And then this woman from behind the counter, she says, you do it, you do it. And then she pulled out her little cross. And, you could see this. So, it's witnessing. We can say it's about the end goal of respecting life from conception till natural death, but very much the Lord just wants us to know it's about the journey. It's about the people we touch along the way. It's about the people we speak to, the people we witness to. And hopefully by your stories and perhaps mine, that people will be encouraged, no matter where you are, whether you're at a border crossing or whether you're just sitting around the table with your family, that we speak out in defense of life.
2010 is actually the very first time I went to Florida, and it was the very first time I ever used abortion victim photography. The very first conversation I had on a Florida campus was with a young woman, and I was really excited to have this discussion because I was hoping I could talk to one of these feminists I'd heard so much about. And this 19-year-old girl came up, she's kind of staring at the signs, and I said, what do you think about abortion? And tears start trickling down her face, and she said, I had one a couple of weeks ago. And I had no idea what to say to her, because I knew how to explain to her that her baby was a human. I knew how to argue that her baby was a person. I had no idea what to say to somebody that was telling me she'd had this experience. She was looking at the consequences of that experience on our sign, and it was too late to persuade her not to do it. And so it shut me up, and I just stood there looking at her, and I said, oh, what do you think of our signs then? And then she got angry, and she actually said, where were you guys 3 weeks ago? She said if she'd seen pictures like this, she wouldn't have done it. And that's when I realized, talking to her, that her sin of commission was our sin of omission, because in a country filled with people who called themselves pro-life, and in a country filled with people who called themselves Christian, the only person who talked to this young woman about abortion was a doctor who took her money and killed her baby. We managed to talk to her later. She actually sought and received hope and healing for what she'd endured. She actually tattooed the name of the child across her womb where that child had lived her very short life. She named the baby Raven. That name has always stuck with me. But that experience transformed the way I saw how these images worked, and transformed the way that I saw what a career could look like. And so I came back to Canada with a whole bunch of other people and joined the pro-life movement, not just in a volunteer capacity on campus, but full-time. If I spent the rest of my life trying to reach out to women like her in time, it would be a life well spent.
In our film, Roe Canada, we had the opportunity to interview Abby Johnson, who many of you know. The movie Unplanned was based on her story, an abortion worker who saw the light, if you will, and has since become a champion for women who want to leave the abortion industry but don't know how to go about it. You had the opportunity to sit down with her in the film. I was there. I was looking at your eyes too. This was a special moment for you. Can you share?
Absolutely. Abby Johnson has an incredible testimony, and she's also a really powerful speaker. So it was such a privilege that we got to interview her for the film. And there's a lot that we leave on the cutting room floor. And one of the stories that we did leave on the floor, but you'll see on social media, is the story of a former abortion worker who actually wrote a letter, a suicide note, because she was preparing to commit suicide before she went on one of the healing retreats provided by Abby Johnson's ministry, And Then There Were None, which is specifically supposed to minister to former abortion workers and help them leave the industry and help them heal from that trauma. And as Abby Johnson was telling this story, I just started crying and tears were running down my face because I was so touched by this woman that was so hurt. And it just took this healing retreat with fellow people who went through that same experience to convince her that no, she can go on and her life is still valuable. And of course, I didn't want to interrupt Abby, and I didn't want anything picked up on her mic. So I'm just trying to cry as silently as possible and in a way that doesn't distract her at all. So it just was a very profoundly human moment for me to be crying and then also trying to respect this story at the same time. And it very much felt like the pinnacle of our experience as well, in terms of so many people are being vulnerable and so many people are speaking such profound truths, and just to note how special that was to be kind of receiving it. And again, I don't know who this woman is. I don't know her story. I'm just hearing it secondhand from Abby Johnson. But to feel so connected to her as well, I think that it's kind of speaks to the beauty of the pro-life movement, how just connected you are to other people's lives. So again, I credit Abby Johnson for just being able to find the right words to express our profound belief in the value of every human life, including those very people who are part of the abortion industry. And again, we hope that they will be converted. And Abby Johnson is a great witness to that.
Most of the workers who come to us suffer from some form of PTSD because of the things that they have experienced or seen inside of the abortion industry. We had a woman named Annette who came on a healing retreat with us, and then there were none. And she only came because we'd already bought her airline ticket, and she didn't want to be rude and waste our money. So she came, but she had already written out her suicide note, and she had already written out the plans for her children and where they should go. She had thrown her wedding ring in the trash, and she was coming to the retreat to be kind, but when she got home, she already had plans to kill herself because she thought, there is no hope for me, and there's no way that I can be forgiven. She came to our retreat. She had a powerful encounter with the Lord. She went home. She ripped up the notes. She dug her wedding ring out of the trash. And now she's one of the most powerful speakers that we have for And Then There Were None. Nobody knows about God unless we tell them about God. And so we have to be willing to expose ourselves, to be willing to expose our sin, and to expose the transformative power of God and how He has transformed our lives. We all have a story. Your story may not be that you worked in an abortion clinic and now God has taken you out of that, but we all have a story of redemption. We were all born with original sin, and God now has redeemed us and has made us new creations. And for most of us have a story where He turned our heart of stone into a heart of flesh, and that is something that we should bear witness to.
Ruth, you had the opportunity to interview another pro-life champion in North America, Kristen Hawkins, Students for Life America. What was that like for you to sit down and speak with such a passionate, wonderful person, not afraid to speak the truth?
Well, it was an incredible honor. It was actually only a few months previous to the interview that I'd even learned who she was, which is ironic because she's been a big name for longer than that. But when I first watched one of her videos on YouTube, I was so impressed by how she was very dedicated to remaining on track and not getting sidetracked by, well, what do you do to take care of homeless people? What do you do to take care of foster children? And she would say, no, we are specifically focused on this human rights violation. Those issues are important, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. And I thought, oh, it's so good to see her doing that. It's a good reminder to stay on track, stay focused. It's something I always try to do in my own pro-life work, and I found it was very encouraging to see how very dedicated other pro-lifers were as well. So every once in a while, when I wanted to see that passion, like, I'm going to watch Kristen Hawkins. So I never said anything, but when I found out that Kristen Hawkins was going to be one of the interviewees, I was hoping I'd be the one who'd get to interview her. So when Josie said, oh, are you going to do Kristen Hawkins? I thought, yes. And it was amazing. It was really amazing. I enjoyed every moment of that interview. But in truth, what was most precious to me was what happened after the interview off camera. That I honestly don't remember everything that I said or didn't say in the interview with her. But what I do remember is the after, where we were just talking more casually, and I mentioned something that had really been bothering me for a while, which was that I had failed to save a life. And that's probably one of the hardest things I dealt with in several months in my activism is we don't know. We know that our actions are effective and that we save a lot of lives that we probably don't even know about, because people come back to us years later and say, oh, I saw you standing there and I changed my mind. And they don't tell you, they don't talk to you. But by the same token, they don't tell you when they don't change their minds either. So I had that experience where I did know that I'd failed. I had spoken to women who in a family, and they were considering abortion, and I was hoping that the resources I had offered, that the information I had given them would change their mind. And it didn't. And I went home and I just cried myself to sleep when I realized that child had been lost. And I was angry too, like God, why do I feel like I loved that baby more than they did? How is that fair? How is that right? Yeah. And maybe it's not true, but in that moment it was. And it was just an awful feeling. I was still carrying remnants of that failure. And I mentioned this to her, and she said that it was important to remember that that baby had someone fighting for them. That on the other side of things, when I meet them again, they will know someone fought for their life. That even though it was a failure in my eyes, it wasn't a failure that came from lack of love. And where there's love, it's never a complete failure, because that baby had someone, even if it was just me. Yeah. And that really helped. It helped ease what was left of the grief and the guilt I felt. I guess you could call it survivor's guilt, maybe. Except survivor's guilt is when you're in the same situation and you survive. I wasn't at risk of abortion, but it was that sense of, but I failed them. And she was saying, no, you did everything you could do, and so you didn't fail them. You loved them, and that's really the most important thing. Yeah. And I think about that a lot now. I remind myself of that when I need that encouragement. What kind of advice would you give to Canadians who are feeling discouraged by just how very, very difficult it is to get these pro-life clubs into universities?
Well, I would say you can't be deterred. You have to be unstoppable. And there's going to be every obstacle thrown at you, and you have to anticipate that those obstacles are coming, but you yourself need to be resolved in your dedication to this issue. Your dedication to doing all that you can to advocate on behalf of these preborn baby girls and baby boys, to speak out against the violence of abortion. And they stop you here, they delay you here, they push you back here, you keep coming back. And I think that's the story that's so great about the American pro-life movement, the March for Life, that in the years where you had successes versus the years you had huge defeats, heartbreaking defeats, we kept coming back to the March for Life.
So in our film Roe Canada, half the film is in the United States. We film it in the United States, and half the film we're filming in Canada. And we asked the question, could we ever see a day like Dobbs, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, our own kind of version of that here in Canada? And Josie, you had the opportunity to sit down with a couple of pro-life MPs, members of Parliament, one Arnold Viersen. Can you speak to that moment and his invitation after the interview?
It was another God moment. It was very providential. When I got the opportunity to interview MP Arnold Viersen, of course, it's very interesting to hear his perspective because he, has committed so much time and energy to advancing human rights in a variety of areas, including in the area of preborn human rights and opposing abortion. And so it was interesting to hear about the different challenges, of course, that are facing pro-life MPs. We have a government that's very hostile to life, very hostile to the pro-life movement. What was interesting is that after that interview, just like coincidentally, Arnold was heading to a meeting of the Foreign Affairs and International Development Committee. And so he invited me to tag along, and I got to do that. And at that committee meeting, there was a representative from the International Planned Parenthood Federation and the Guttmacher Institute, which is kind of like the pro-abortion research arm. And they were, of course, giving pro-abortion talking points. And there was also a Ugandan MP who was testifying about how Africa is actually very pro-life and how they want support to be able to ensure that the young people in their country can go to school. They are not interested in funding for abortion, and they consider that colonization. And she said, you have to respect the sovereignty of her own country in terms of their rejection of abortion and their appreciation for life, which they recognize begins at conception. So it was such I think, a disparity between how this African MP treated life and to see, some of the faithful pro-life MPs here in Canada that are trying in vain to reopen this conversation, and yet they're facing such obstacles in doing that. So it was a very cool experience. Again, just kind of coincidental timing, really puts into perspective what we're trying to do here with this work is, again, just what this African MP was talking about, just an appreciation for the value of each life. And she had such a profound understanding of that. And as Canadians, we've lost that. And there's, such a climb to be able to restore that in Canada. But what else are we going to do? Like, if we don't, then the future of our country is gone. So as challenging as it may be, there's only one way forward, and that is to have a true understanding of what human rights involve.
I'm not sure that there's a correction that needs to happen. Pro-lifers are there defending the rights of the human rights of preborn people. I've stood up and made this case before. We need to ensure that 300 babies that die every day in Canada don't die every day in Canada. It's not about fixing the perceptions. It's about winning the argument. It's about getting the more votes. And every time Justin Trudeau talks about it, it's an opportunity for us to raise the issue once again, and just to call them out on their rhetoric and remind Canadians that 300 babies die every day in Canada because of abortion.
Anybody in the pro-life movement will, at one time or another, hear the excuse, well, what about in the case of rape? And what was really blew me away while we were filming down in Washington, D.C., amongst 500,000 people, our principal investigator, Ruth, is walking with one of our camera crews and comes across a gentleman and has his own story. Can you share a little bit about how you felt while you were interviewing this gentleman who was a few generations away from his grandmother who was raped?
What was remarkable about that interview was that it was at the end of the march when we thought, okay, we're done filming, there's no more interviews to do. And then I just sort of casually got into a discussion with this man. And I thought, well, why not? Like one last interview, it couldn't hurt. And so I said, would you mind if we interviewed you? And he says, sure. And I had no idea this was his testimony. I just thought we'll ask more people, get more people to talk about Roe v. Wade in Canada and the States, and then we have just more footage to choose from. And so I think it was just, once again, entirely God bringing the people to us. Because it was only once I'd started the interview that the conversation shifted, and his tone changed, and his countenance changed, and he became, I want to call it solemn, but it was more than solemn. It was profound. It was like looking into eternity in a way. The moment just had that change where you just know it's spirit filled. And he talked about his grandmother, and he said that his grandmother had been raped, but she felt that it was not God's will for her to kill an innocent child. That child did not deserve to die for the crimes of the father, and she would not do that to her child. And that child was his mother. And he said, that's why I'm here. And it was just incredible to me because, well, that's why you're at the march. Yes. And it's literally why you are at the march. And it was important even to me beyond the classic, well, what about rape question, where it highlights the humanity of children, regardless of the crimes or of their parents or the circumstances of their conception. It also indicates that the loss of these children cannot be counted because it doesn't just affect us losing them in our lives, but the children they would have had, or those children would have had for generations going on and on and on. It's completely incalculable what we have deprived ourselves of. And to be able to speak and have his very presence witness to that was profound. And I knew that was going to make the cut for sure. It was just too much of a Holy Spirit moment. I said, I just knew in that moment, yes, we have to include this. And he didn't really have to say much. That's why I'm here. And that's all that was needed for me to hear. His very presence was the most powerful thing, more than anything he or I could ever say.
If you haven't watched the film yet, this moment in the film when Ruth interviews this gentleman about his grandma is so profound and so telling about the generational impact that abortion has on society, and more importantly, in the lives of those that we love, friends that we will never know. I spoke to that gentleman after. I called him on the phone because I wanted to tell him how much I appreciated him sharing his story on camera. And he said, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. And yeah, he shared some of his struggles today and life, but he loves life. And he says, I go to the March for Life every year to witness.
My grandmother was raped. She decided to have that child because she believed that's what God would have her to do. And all the time, this human being is churning inside of her. She knows that it's because of the sins of that father, right? That child's father. And yet, she decided to have my mom. That's why I'm here. I'm grateful. I get a little emotional, but had it not been for my grandmother choosing life, I would not be here talking to you.
Now, finally, the 50th March, we're finally returning to a Supreme Court that has done the right thing in overturning Roe v. Wade. This dark cloud is not looming over our heads anymore. The sun can come through.
So we interview a lot of champions in Roe Canada, the True North, and a post-Roe world. One of them is Seth Dillon from the Babylon Bee. If you haven't seen the Babylon Bee's satirical website, you have to check it out, because it's that check-in where you just sometimes got to laugh at the craziness of the politics and the wokeness going on in the world. And here's a guy that wasn't afraid to take a stance against the culture of death, abortion. And I always wanted to know, why would somebody with such a successful operation delve into this area? Josie, maybe we interview you in the film, but let's hear about your experience interviewing Seth Dillon of the Babylon Bee.
So the first interview I did for the film was with Seth Dillon. So that was extremely intimidating for me, because I love the Babylon Bee like so many others. It's hilarious, but also it doesn't compromise the truth. And I think there's so many platforms, so many good platforms, that end up making poor decisions because of the allure of success or popularity. Whereas I have to commend Seth and I have to commend the Babylon Bee, because I think part of the reason for its appeal is that it hasn't let that temptation of, potentially being bigger and better and all of that by watering down its message. It's truthful. It's funny and it's truthful. And so that was such a fun interview for me to do. I was super nervous and scared for it. And it was really funny also rolling up to Babylon Bee headquarters, because part of the reason for Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, now X, is because Babylon Bee was suspended from Twitter. And so Seth and Babylon Bee, they have a pretty close relationship with Elon Musk now. And so you drive up and you just see a bunch of Teslas at the opposite. It's like, we know we're in the right place. So yeah, it was just a really fun experience. And now we see that Seth is speaking to so many different pro-life audiences as well. He was one of the speakers at the National Pro-Life Summit, which is run by the Students for Life of America, right after the DC March for Life. So he was also at that event. So it's great that, despite how popular it is, despite his appeal, he still prioritizes the pro-life issue. So it was great to have him in the film.
Were you always pro-life, and how did you learn how to make such a persuasive pro-life case?
There was never a time when I was pro-choice. I just never, probably growing up, I wasn't really acquainted with, as a child and as a teen, the pro-life case and the arguments. I was intuitively, and through my Christian education, I grew up in the church, I valued life. I thought abortion was wrong, but I probably couldn't have articulated why necessarily. So yes, I was always pro-life, but not necessarily equipped to defend the pro-life position. And I mean, that's natural. You need education to do that, right? So there's a bunch of people that I would credit that to, but I mean, there's pro-life apologists that you can pick up these books and read them. I was just reading one by Ryan Anderson recently. There's a ton of resources out there where you have a case for life that's spelled out, that deals with all the thorny issues. And a lot of people just never take the time to read those books and acquaint themselves with those arguments, but I felt it was necessary because it was a topic that just came up all of the time. And it was never a situation where I thought to myself, I'm going to be one of the leading voices here, I'm going to be a pro-life speaker, or this is something that I want to dedicate myself to. It was just, I was concerned with all of the callousness that I saw on one side about this issue, and I was very worried that I would end up in conversations where I wouldn't have something to say, where I could actually rebut their arguments. And so I wanted to equip myself. So I did that proactively. So I tapped into those resources wherever I could. So I never really had a purpose for it other than I just wanted to be able to intelligently defend my position. And I think that's whether it's the pro-life arena that you're getting into, or anything, the existence of God, whatever it is, there's so many resources at your disposal, and I try it to the best of my ability with the limited time that I have to equip myself so that I'm not just sitting there dumbfounded when somebody brings up an argument I can't respond to.
I commend you for that, and I think that every pro-lifer needs to take that responsibility upon themselves, knowing that they might be in a position where they're the only person around who could potentially make a difference and save a life if they're able to do their best to provide a case for keeping the child. So I would like to see all of them, look into pro-life apologetics as you did.
You don't have to take a course, you don't have to go to school. It's as simple as just picking up a book, The Case for Life, something like that just spells it out there for you, and you can acquaint yourself with some of the main objections, and you don't need to be a biologist or have any advanced degrees.
Ruth, we're going to wrap up here soon on this kind of look back behind the scenes of Roe Canada. Ruth, any final thoughts before we wind up here?
Just that I thought it was funny when I got to watch Josie get excited about meeting pro-life heroes of her own. So I do remember there was this one moment, I won't name any names, but there was someone who was at the expo, I believe it was, and Josie was so excited to see him or her, I won't say which, and she's like, Ruth, can you film me interviewing him? Like, her? I don't know. Can we just make up a reason to go up and talk to him? I was like, I had no clue who this person was, but it was nice to see Josie look so excited. So I said, sure, why not?
Josie, you gotta share.
And she did her interview with this person. And that was definitely a highlight for me to see Josie light up like a small child.
Did it make the film? I've never heard.
It did not, no.
Oh.
It's Robert George you're talking about, right?
Yes, it is.
Robert George.
Well, do tell.
So lots of things get left on the cutting room floor, as I learned. It's part of the sacrifice of filmmaking. And so one of the interviews that didn't make it into the film was one I did with Robert George. And many of you might not know him, but he is a professor at Princeton. He is a really notable pro-life academic. And I studied philosophy in university, and there are so many pro-choice philosophers that you're forced to read. And it's really rare when you come across a pro-life academic. And I know how hard it is to be pro-life in academia because you're such a minority, and the institution generally is very pro-abortion. So Robert George was one of the first people I remember reading who said that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned with the Dobbs case. And I was skeptical all the way along. But when I read Robert George's reasons for believing that, I started to think maybe it will happen because he's so confident about it. He also wrote The Wrong of Abortion with Patrick Lee, which is one of my favorite articles about the pro-life position. When I was youth coordinator for Campaign Life Coalition, I would make our interns read sections of that article, even though it was, kind of dense, kind of philosophical. But he was a little bit of a hero to me, just because of his legal work and his work in the pro-life field. So I did get a chance to interview him, even though that interview didn't make it into the film. It was still really nice to be able to talk to him. So Robert George, I know you argued that it wasn't possible for the Supreme Court not to overturn Roe v. Wade, that given the facts of the case, there was no other solution than for them to overturn it, or else they would just be betraying the law and their principles. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure, it's straightforward. The fact is that there is nothing in the Constitution of the United States, nothing in any of its provisions that supports the idea of a right to abortion. There's nothing in the text. There's nothing in the logic of what is in the text. There's nothing in the structure of the Constitution. Certainly nothing in the historical understanding of the Constitution and its provisions to support the idea that there's a right to kill unborn children. So the decision was made up out of whole cloth. There was no basis for it. The judges were making law. They weren't doing their constitutional duty, which is not to make the law, that's up to the legislature, but rather to interpret the law and apply it fairly. So it lacked any intellectual credibility. Even people who were supportive, including constitutional scholars who were supportive of the idea of legal abortion in 1973, recognized that the decision so-called interpreting the Constitution as creating a right to abortion was absolutely untenable. And so, for example, John Hart Ely, the famous Harvard law professor who became dean of the Stanford Law School and a very eminent constitutional scholar, himself a supporter of legal abortion, said Roe is wrong because not only is it not constitutional law, it doesn't even show any ambition to be constitutional law. So it was a lawless, unconstitutional decision. It had to go.
Absolutely. And can you comment on the role of academics in the battle about abortion? So I think we often think of this, as happening on the streets, but also our institutions play a very large role as well.
Well, that's true. When it came to the constitutional question in the United States, of course, constitutional scholars were in the forefront, and historians as well, trying to understand the historical meaning of the Constitution. But when we get beyond that question, the question of Roe versus Wade, the constitutional question, there's of course the more fundamental question, which is the question of right or wrong, good or bad, justice or injustice. There's no question that abortion is lethal violence against the unborn. So that leaves the question, well, is it justified lethal violence or unjustified? And scholars on the so-called pro-choice side have labored. Of course, they are by far the majority in the academic world. They've labored to show that there's some justification for killing the unborn on the theory that the unborn are not yet persons, or if they are persons, it's nevertheless justified to kill unborn children, even when the pregnancy poses no threat to the mother. But they've failed. Scholars on the other side, philosophers, moral thinkers on the other side, have shown that the unborn are just like us. They are whole living members of the species Homo sapiens. They are flesh and blood human beings. They have the same rights that the rest of us have, if in fact we're committed, as even those on the pro-choice side claim to be committed, to the idea that each and every member of the human family is a bearer of profound, inherent, and equal dignity. So those of us who are on the pro-life side, who've made that argument, are simply calling on our fellow citizens in our democratic orders to give effect to that principle, give effect to the principle of the profound, inherent, and equal dignity of each and every member of the human family. And just as we must not discriminate against people or attack people on the basis of race or sex or ethnicity or any of those categories, we mustn't discriminate against people or attack people on the basis of age or size or stage of development or condition of dependency. We need to make good on the promise that we in the United States have in our Declaration of Independence, the proposition that all men are created equal. And more generally, for people throughout the world, the proposition that all of us are bearers of profound, inherent, and equal dignity.
Ruth, has this film changed you, changed the way you look at the work that you do in the pro-life movement?
Well, it's certainly given me more hope. But perhaps not more hope. You always have to have hope before anything can be accomplished. I think the problem with humans, and because I fall prey to this all the time, is that we look for reasons to hope before we hope. So that's a problem, because in order for example, in order for us to hope that we are going to have a sandwich today, we need to have the hope of a sandwich so that we can go and get a sandwich. Very poor example. If you want to hope that abortion will be overturned, then you have to act on that hope in order for it to be realized. Roe v. Wade being overturned is revitalizing to the pro-life movement because it shows us that even when the cause seems hopeless, that's when you need hope the most. We have it precisely backwards. You don't see a reason to hope and then hope. You hope because you have a reason to, that you're working towards. And because you have this ideal you're striving towards, it can be accomplished. And that's what filming this documentary reminded of, was that Roe v. Wade, we were all cynical. We didn't think it would get overturned. But the Americans, they've been fighting for years in what seemed like a hopeless situation where they had to take on the Supreme Court of all possible institutions, like the highest court in the land. And it had every right to say it's hopeless, but they didn't, because there was an ideal that they were hoping for. And the hope comes first, and then there's the manifestation. And it was a reminder of that for me, is that, yeah, it feels so hopeless, but those are the moments when you actually have the most cause to hope. Hope comes first.
St. Paul, always have a reason for your hope. Always have that reason for your hope. And I'm probably not quoting him, properly, but that's it. Always have that reason for your hope. And even in the darkest hours, there's what the other line, it's always darkest before the dawn. And I think that's something that we all have to remember day to day as we go about trying to proclaim this gospel of life. Josie, has this film changed you?
The film has changed me, and it's provided me with some important lessons. First lesson is that you need to have trust that God will give you the tools necessary to do whatever job he's calling you to do. So Kevin Dunn interviewed me over a decade ago, and I look back at that video and I just see myself stumbling over words. I still don't feel like I'm a natural on camera. So it was really intimidating to take on a huge film project. And yet I prayed about it, and I thought that this was something that God was calling me to do. So I said yes to Kevin, and I trusted that he would be able to figure out the film side of things, and I would be able to learn as I go. And that's exactly what happened. And so that's a metaphor for really all of us in the pro-life movement. You might not know how you could possibly do street activism, or how you could get involved in politics, or how you could sit down and start counseling women at a crisis pregnancy center. But you don't need to figure out these things before you get involved. You can figure out these things once you get involved, and you'll find that God gives you the necessary graces and connects you to the right mentors to figure this out. So it was kind of reassurance for me that if I say yes to God, he will ensure that I have what I need to carry out this work that he's calling me to do. And I think the other lesson that I take from it is that I'm still just an ordinary person at the end of the day. And it feels weird to kind of be one of the two principal investigators, and to have so many people, come up to me after a screening and talk about what they liked and found moving from the film. And again, I'm just an activist, and I have a regular day job, and I go and I answer the phone, and I have my menial tasks, my menial data entry that I'll still do as well. And so again, I'm not anybody special. When you see me talking to people on the street, it's not like I have a supernatural gift to know exactly what to say. I'm just like everyone else. And I think that the film, in a way, was an important reminder that I'm just one of many people in this movement, and so many of them are doing extraordinary work day by day. Some of them we got to profile, some of them we did not. But that's not, again, the film is just representative of what people are doing daily and the sacrifices they're making daily. And you could be one of those people too.
My family, friends have always asked me, what's your favorite part of doing this film or that film? And I always say it's the credit roll. It's the people like you, Josie, and like you, Ruth, we get to know along the way. The people that you interview that you didn't think had something to say have the most profound things to say. you know, the people that you think you can't reach or that they're too high profile come to the table and say, yeah, well, how can I help you? You know, I got this beautiful picture in my office, and it was drawn by a beautiful artist, you know, who suffers with a real disability. But she has this incredible gift of drawing, and it's this picture of Peter looking across at Jesus while he's getting out of the boat and walking on water himself. And that's the call, to keep looking at Christ. Keep looking forward. Do not look down, because when we look down, we see we're just the average person with the day job and doing the that's what we look at. How can I make a mark? What can I do? And yet when we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, doors open that we never thought would open. It was a year ago, Josie and I were sitting down after the March for Life, and we were taking little sticky notes and putting the storyboard together for the film on what we had shot and what we had hoped to shoot to try and make a continuous story. And yet here we are, a year later, with an 80-minute film, an outreach campaign, an educational platform for the film that we're working on for schools, lists on our website of all the different areas of the pro-life movement that you can get involved with. So much has been wrought by this film. I just ask God to bless you, Josie, and you, Ruth, and everybody out there who's watching. If you haven't seen the film, RoeCanadaFilm.com is where you got to go. Have a look and share it. Talk to friends about it. Do those action items that are at the end of the film that Josie so beautifully laid out. See the interviews that Ruth did. It's really a wonderful, inspired film, and it's been an honor to be a part of it. I thank every single person that's in a credit roll and every single person that wasn't mentioned in the credit roll. But God bless you, and thank you, Josie and Ruth, for being a part of this interview today.
Well, thank you, Kevin, because
it's been an honor, Kevin.
No one has put more blood, sweat, and tears into this film than you have. And I think you can really tell that there's so much heart in the film, and it's thanks to your vision, because walking into this, again, I don't think Ruth and I had any idea what we were doing.
No.
But you had a plan, and it was working with you on the National March for Life all of these years that gave me the confidence that you would be able to get us to that end stage, that you can see things before anyone else sees them. And I was willing to follow your vision on that. And I'm really proud that I was able to take part in this project. So I thank you for that very unique prophetic eye that you have, and the hope that drives you every day.
Oh, to add to Josie's eloquence there, if there's one thing I took away from this experience that has nothing, at least overtly, to do with the pro-life movement, it's just an increased measure of respect for filmmakers like you, Kevin, and for Chris and Everett as well, who are willing to go out and tell these stories. It's amazing how much goes into it. I had no idea. And I'm so grateful to have you guys doing this.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us and sharing these wonderful stories about your experiences with Roe Canada. To you watching at home, thank you very much for joining us as well. Please visit the film website and you can watch the film for yourself. It is available now. Please order a screening or look into a screening for your area, for your church, for your organization. Everything's right there on the website, RoeCanadaFilm.com. I ask that the Lord bless you and keep you, let his face shine upon you, and be gracious to you. And may one day we see a culture of life return to our country, return to the world. Amen. Good night, and God bless.
I hope you enjoyed tonight's Life on Film presentation of Roe Canada in conversation with film director Kevin Dunn and film principal investigators Josie Luetke and Ruth Robert. Good news is this whole program will stay on our YouTube channel, March for Life Canada, indefinitely. So if you missed it tonight or you want to share this program with your friends or family or your pastor or your school community, it's on here forever. So just come back to this channel, subscribe, like it, and please, please, please share this Life on Film feature. So yeah, once again, the March for Life is this week. It's this Thursday. I hope you're all planning your trip. Your buses are ready to go. You've taken the day off work. You're pulling your kids from school if you have to. Your kids, maybe they're going with their school trip or their youth group. We can't wait to see all of you in our nation's capital this week. Once again, for all the information, the full list of the schedule, the full list of everything that's happening this week, you can go to marchforlife.ca. Our whole team here at Campaign Life Coalition and the National March for Life Organizing Committee, we are looking forward to seeing all of you in our nation's capital as we walk and march for an end to abortion, for an end to euthanasia, and for an end to all the attacks on human life that are taking place in our country, urging our elected officials to act, to do something, to speak up, and to fight against this culture of death that has just completely swallowed up our nation. So please, 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 we ask for your prayers for the success and safety for all of us organizing the march, but also for everyone attending, everyone traveling, that we may all get to Ottawa safely and have a truly a blessed experience at the National March for Life. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching tonight. We can't wait to see you in Ottawa this week. Have a great evening. God bless.